Greetings and salutations. Today we will be covering the case of the Luna Park train fire demon, also known as the Sydney Ghost Train Fire, which occurred at Luna Park, Sydney, Australia. This incident ended the lives of 7. The victims of said fire were comprised of adults and children. The event occurred in June 9, 1979. It was in Milsons Point, New South Wales. The ride, also known as the park's ghost train, was first constructed in 1931 and transported to Milsons Point and put into operation between 1934 and 35. Since 1935, the ghost train ride had been a major part of Sydney's most famous and well-known amusement park. This ride had been designed so its train cars would go through a dark tunnel in a haunted house-style attraction, where jump scares, along with other frights and scares, would thrill the riders with a memorable experience. A little fun, a little fright, sounds like it's right up my alley. While looking back on one of the last photos that would be taken of her family, Jenny Godson would state, "We asked Damien and Craig what ride they would like to go on again. They chose the ghost train. Little did I know, for some reason, suddenly I felt like an ice cream. I asked the others if they wanted one, but they said no. I asked them to wait for me, but when I turned around, they were gone. I don't know why they didn't wait for me, as we'd been on every ride together that night. It still haunts me to this day. Something spiritual took over. Divine intervention? For some reason, I was not meant to die that night." To her, the unidentified masked figure standing next to her children in the picture would forever be an omen, a signal that at that moment fate had been sealed, and there would never be anything that she could do, or anyone could do, to avoid the tragedy that would befall her that night. Jenny understood that the particular encounter was strange at the time. Unfortunately, it would not be until hours later that the demonic figure's meaning would be made clear to her. After the Luna Park fire, said demon would become a lightning rod for suspicions of those suffered through the tragedy of the fire, or even just looked into it with a curious eye. To look at things in further detail, we'll be starting from the top. It was an average June 9th in 1979, when a fire broke out inside the Luna Park ghost train ride at around 10:15 p.m. It would take fire services around an hour to contain the fire. However, it was extinguished before any extensive damage could occur to the adjacent attractions. Originally, it was thought that at least 35 individuals were on the ride when the plumes of smoke began to seep through the tunnel doors as if it were some ominous miasma. This quickly set off alarms, and the staff started to evacuate those people who were in the ride proper. At the beginning, it was believed that there had been no casualties in the fire. Unfortunately, at about 11:30 p.m., 7 bodies had been uncovered within the ride. These bodies were those of John Godson and his 2 children, Damien and Craig, along with the bodies of Jonathan Billings, Richard Carroll, Mitchell Johnson, and Seamus Riley. During the beginning stages of the investigation, police speculated that the 7 had climbed out of their cars and unsuccessfully attempted to make their way out of the tunnel to avoid the fire. It is believed that if they had stayed in the cars, they could have possibly survived, due to some of the surviving members having reported passing empty passenger cars while they were exiting the tunnels. At first, blame would be placed on electrical faults. However, there were those who made claims of it being arson. The cause of the fire would not be determined by coroner inquiry. The coroner stated that while the actions of Luna Park's management and staff before and during the fire, as in not following the advice that they had been given to install a sprinkler system on the ride, breached their duty of care, charges of criminal negligence should not be laid on them. This case would later be reopened in 1987 through a government inquiry by the National Crime Authority. No new evidence was presented. However, they criticized the original investigation and the methodology that was used in it, and found that the police investigation had been an absolute failure in almost every conceivable way. And they also found that the coroner inquiry was lacking. The effects of the fire had caused the park to need to be closed. That is, until 1982, when it once again reopened under new management, and under a new name as well. It would eventually be demonstrated that the ride's permanent wiring, along with other attractions' wires, were not the starting point of the blaze. A report stated that while the park's owners and management did fail their duty of care towards the individuals on the ride, said failure was not that high degree of negligence necessary to support criminal charges. The governor of New South Wales would go on to call for a change in who would operate the park on the 31st of July 1979. There would eventually be a memorial garden installed at Luna Park in 1995. However, it would later require replacement due to the disappearance of portions of it. A plaque listing those who were killed was placed on the location of the ride. However, a promised mural to surround the plaque was never painted. A separate mural on the park was created by the North Sydney Council in 2007, including a sculpture. That's a lot better than no memorial. Also in 2007, Anne Buckingham, a relative of Abe Saffron, a man who was well known to have ties to the criminal element, would go in for an interview, or at least it's claimed that she did, with the Sydney Morning Herald, saying that her uncle was responsible for the fire. Saffron had been believed to have been tied to at least 7 other arson incidents in the years following the ghost train fire. However, he had made it a point to repeatedly deny any involvement with the ghost train fire in particular. Well, now that's interesting, ain't it? This one in particular wasn't him. Buckingham later claimed that the attack was part of a plan for Saffron to gain control of Luna Park's lease. However, she believed that the 7 deaths were not part of the intended outcome. Former park artist Martin Sharp had stated that Saffron had approached Luna Park's owner, Ted Hopkins, several years before the fire, offering to buy the park. Now, it must be noted that in 1985, it was claimed by New South Wales MP Michael John Hatton that Saffron had beneficial ownership of the park. This caused an inquiry to be raised, which concluded that although people related to Saffron were involved in supplying both pinball and arcade games to Luna Park, Saffron himself was not linked to the ownership of the park proper. Buckingham would later deny that she had made the comments attributed to her, and proceeded to both request and later demand that the story not be published. However, the Herald claims that the original statements were recorded on tape during a face-to-face interview. However, were they really as forthcoming as it could be in the interview? While also bringing her statements into question. If she is recanting the story for any reason, is the story as reliable as it could be? Or is it some sort of fabrication on either her end or a lookalike's end? Later, in 2021, there would be movement in the case when Australia's national broadcaster, the Australian Broadcasting Corporation, also known as ABC, but not to be confused with the Americans' ABC or the American Broadcasting Companies, screened a 3-part investigation series by journalist Caro Meldrum Hanna under the title Exposed: The Ghost Train Fire. This series investigated the fire and the personalities involved, going so far as to interview all surviving family members of the fire's victims, alleged and potential witnesses, along with former park staff and other officials. Said investigation concluded that the blame should lay on Saffron, along with the New South Wales Prime Minister Neville Warren and former High Court Justice Lionel Murphy. And let's also include the organized crime boss Jack Rooklin, stating that they were all responsible for the fire, claiming that Saffron had allegedly ordered the fire to be lit so he could gain control of the Crown land, which the park stood on. Crown land is land protected by the state's government. However, this investigation has as of yet not caused a reopening of the case. Now on to some theories about the fire. There have been many theories about this case, ranging from electrical issues, cigarette cinders, arson committed by the local criminal element under Abe Saffron's guidance, to even ritual sacrifice to the ancient Ammonite god Moloch. This last theory has had the most traction and drawn the most attention to the incident as of late. This is to there being a bull that is indirectly tied to the ritual sacrifice of children to the god that would take place in a giant oven, depicted as a bull. The children would be placed inside the oven or within the figure's arms, and then burnt to death. Now this theory gained some real traction when a picture was found that possibly was the last ever taken of the young boys that were killed in the fire. Standing next to them is a figure dressed in a strange horned bull-like mask complete with horns that is completely out of place in the park, including in the horror attraction. The photo was taken just before the boys were inside the park. Some go as far as to believe that the figure itself was a manifestation of the demonic entity that took part in the ritual. This theory also goes on and uses the accounts of a boy by the name of Marshall who said that a car was let on by the operator with 2 young boys inside, even after he had signaled that there was a fire occurring within the attraction. This theory was even further reported on an issue of Sydney's The Sun newspaper, which featured the story on the front page titled "Occult Link to the Luna Park / Ghost Train Fire." Luna Park was closed after the tragedy, then reopened in the 80s. However, it would be closed several more times and have several more reopenings, and it would continue to do so until 2004, where it reopened and has now, as of yet, still remained open. Despite the claims ranging from faulty wiring to sabotage in an attempt to have the park closed down, or even demonic rituals, the cause of the fires has never been established. And so, the mystery of the Luna Park train fire demon remains. If you have remained with me until the end, I thank you, and I do hope you stay tuned and subscribe for more content.